So are you enjoying this cake?
Yes, this is really incredible.
Is that part of your diet?
But you don't have to eat such a big piece.
Well, this is my second piece.
I'm sure it is.
No, this cake has got a kick. And I can feel it. That's why I said if I start again on this cake, I'll be going on forever.
I hope it will inspire you to carry on with your story.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Okay.
Great. Yeah.
Maybe it's given me some brain food. All right.
Anyway, we were
Put
just
the cake
talking about your work before Bharatanatyam and the Buddhist production. So why don't we hear more about it?
Okay. As I was explaining earlier, Milarepa was a story of a saint, a Buddhist, Tibetan Buddhist saint. I decided to tell his story because I thought it was a very important part of Tibetan Buddhism, the philosophy behind it, the suffering he underwent. And there was also a lot of magic involved in the story. Now, when you look at our dance forms, there's always the element of
mysticism.
Sometimes people say not just mysticism, but occult.
I didn't realize
yes.
that.
You know, like when we look at the traditions in Mat Yong, for instance, when in Trinai, it's the same. In Indian classical dance, it's the same. Now, I decided to do Milarepa, but I wasn't going to use Bharatanatyam necessarily. I did use parts of it, but there was also Odyssey. And then I decided to blend it with a lot of Malaysian classical dance styles, storytelling traditions from Mat Yong, for instance, my training in Balinese dance, and also my always my admiration for Joget Gamelan in Malaysia. So it came together. What I decided to do, originally I had commissioned the music to be written by a composer in Melbourne. He couldn't crack it. He couldn't understand.
Who was the composer?
I'd rather not mention names. But he couldn't crack it. So in the end I thought, all right, I'm just going to do the music myself.
Oh, wow.
So I had a gamelan set. I trained a few people to just play, and then I employed two musicians, a flute player and a violin player. And I had a lot of percussion instruments from the Indian background. And it took me 3 months, I think, to do the full recording according to the script I wrote for the work. And then costumes. Okay, it's a Tibetan story, but I wasn't going to just say it's only Tibetan. I wanted it to be universal. I wanted the story to be of relevance to any culture. So I used, being Malaysian, I think this is important. Being Malaysian, you always have this multicultural approach. It matters across culture. So whether you're Indian or Chinese or Kadazan or Iban or whatever it is, there is a point where we all can understand each other. And that was my approach to Milarepa. So Tibetan it may be, and I also used language. I used English. Now, when people write great operas, somebody said to me, why didn't you use the original Tibetan? Some smart Alec, critical of my work, said, why didn't you use the original Tibetan songs? I said, because nobody would understand it. I said, in the West, we have such great respect for people like Puccini, Verdi. Now, what language did they write their operas in? So you have in Puccini's Madama Butterfly, that's this Japanese woman in love with this American man, and she's singing in Italian. And yet it's today regarded as one of the major pieces of opera. I say, well, Milarepa was the same. I wanted it to be understood, so let's use English. And there were a couple of songs of Milarepa's original song translated into English, and I set to music. So it was hit or miss. For me, it was like I spent 6 months, and at one stage I was on tranquilizers. I was going mad with trying to finish the work. But when it opened, I had the support of all the Tibetan Buddhist followers.
Oh, fantastic.
Now they are a very big group in Melbourne, and we even got a letter from the Dalai Lama wishing us the best of luck for the story of Milarepa. So we had full houses for 12 performances, and the following year people in Malaysia had heard about the production, and they asked me whether I could bring the production here, and I said, well, if we get enough sponsorship. Yes, the cast, there were 25 people in the cast. So in 1988, we were able to bring that production here, and at the same time I chose to premiere a new contemporary work, again based on historical evidence. As a child, I was always fascinated by the dongson drums. You know, seeing them in the museum, I was fascinated by what people did make this incredible artifact. So for a long time, I wanted to make a dance work about those drums. So I chose to do it in Malaysia. We premiered it here, and then took it back to Australia. So there was always this coming and going for me, you know, like bring it to Malaysia, take it back, you know. And the Trinai was the same. You know, some of the works I choreographed in Trinai were done in Melbourne and then brought back and taught to dancers in Perlis, and now it's being taught at OAM. So I'll always feel that if a dance work is good enough, it can cross barriers. It doesn't matter when you do it, so long as you understand. Sometimes you have to do a little bit of editing. You know, as we all know, we hate doing those editings, cutting little bits here and there to make it shorter. But that's having done Milarepa and Dongson, I was set and recognized. I think more importantly, the recognition that was given to me in Australia. 1988, and in 1989, I was appointed to the Australia Council for the Arts for dance, and I was the first non-English or non-Western person to be on that committee. It was a board of 5 people, peer group assessment. Our job was to make policies for the future, and this was at the height of the multicultural period, multicultural building period in Australia. And I really thought, you know, it's not a position I want to be, because I would rather be making works than sitting down and making policies. But it would help. It helped other people who came after me, that the recognition that multicultural artists from different backgrounds should be given respect. And of course, the funding. The funding was always, you know, the issue, the unfairness of funding. If you're a ethnic dancer, as they would call it, you get very little.
The perennial problem in Malaysia also, funding.
So
I'm quite keen to ask you about, you know, you said you performed it in English, the Tibetan story. Do you think you could bring it back to Malaysia and do it now and do it in English without getting into all this post-colonial talk about decolonizing?
I make no apologies about it. The very fact that you and I are speaking in English, I mean, we have to give credit where it's due. You know, I'm not a what do you call it?
Nativist.
A protagonist for this anti-colonial thing. I always say that I'm post-colonial. post-colonial writing is some of the most important that we've had.
Yes.
Post-colonial ideas, post-colonial theatre. You know, but if you dwell on the fact, the colonizers were so nasty to us and they did nothing for us, you're not going to get anywhere. So I'd rather look at the post-colonial thing. In Australia, this is one thing I have to say. In Australia, when I started talking about post-colonial thinking, post-colonial writing, they didn't understand what I was talking about. You know why? Because Australia never saw itself as a colony.
Yes.
Exactly.
In fact, it is. But they never saw themselves as a colony. They identified, see, British India was a colony, one of the most important. But Australians will say, British India, and Australia's relationship with India is still not what Britain and India have, because the imagination wasn't there. You know, India was part of the British Raj, but Australia was not part of a colony, or at least that's what.
No, I think there's a big difference.
Yeah.
Australia, when you see Australia as a colony, it is the British moving there.
Yeah.
Yes,
You know?
and they
It's not the
colonized.
British coming to a country and imposing their values.
Hey,
Here, they're coming somewhere.
What about the Aboriginal people of Australia? You are
Well, that's another
different story again. Because they were the ones who colonized.
That's a different.
So maybe
Yeah.
post-colonial thinking is where if you are a white country, even though you were colonized by the British, you don't think of it in that way.
Well, that goes for America, that goes for South Africa, that goes for New Zealand.
Yeah.
And
So-
probably also like the Falkland Islands.
Yeah,
where some
exactly.
part-
So now we are talking about this kind of thing. Yeah.
So until today, for instance, when you talk about post-colonial in Australia, today, at least with the help of a lot of clever people, academics, it is recognized. When I say post-colonial thinking, they know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
But in the old days, you know, years earlier, because of my training in social anthropology as a social scientist, I used to talk about Edward Said. You know, Edward Said's writing. And people used to look at me and say, you know, are you pro-Palestine? Palestine. I said, no, I'm talking about Edward Said's thinking. He has looked at the issue of Palestine and the Middle East, and his book on Orientalists. I said, look at how he has defined and given such great thought to how the West imagined. You know, when I say imagine, it wasn't what the reality was. They had imagined it to be such, and it stayed put. So today, you know, it's part of our job to debunk a lot of that. But as I said, without the English language, I wouldn't be able to make sense of what all these ideas.
Wonderful.